Hello, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford, and this is the award-winning TV talk show right here on Ebru Fresh Outlook. A husband and wife team barge into the husband's workplace holiday party dressed in tactical gear and armed to the teeth. 14 people are murdered, shot to death, dozens of others wounded. The death toll changes. The places change. 9 in a church, 23 in a restaurant, 26 in an elementary school, and now 14 at a holiday party. But the weapons, well, they don't seem to change. Mass killings in the United States are often carried out with guns, most of them obtained legally. Let's say hello to the Fresh Outlook panel of experts. I'm joined by John Paitakes, a criminal justice professor from Seton Hall University, Joe Blaettler, a retired police administrator and president of the East Coast Private Investigations, Jackie Guzda, a media analyst from Western Connecticut State University, and joining us live via Skype is Dr. Bart Rossi, a political psychologist. Bart, you're up in the monitor. I'll begin with you. What's your takeaway? What's the headline from this latest mass murder out in California?
Well, I think the most important factor here is the psychology of the ideology. We're talking a lot about ISIL and military solutions. There really is no military solution to wipe out ISIL. You can kill all of the soldiers, the ISIL soldiers, tomorrow, but the ideology and the psychology of this type of thinking will prevail. And we don't know when the next jihadist is going to come down from wherever to fill those that we just killed. So I think that what's missing here is that the U.S. and our supposed allies need to think about how we're going to combat thought, a thinking process, a fanaticism. That's what we really need to do. And the psychology of this is much bigger than the military solution. That's what I take out of it. And of course, there's always the factor of guns. Why we are allowing people to get semi-automatic assault weapons is just beyond me. There are too many people in this country who cannot control themselves with guns, that's for sure.
All right, thanks, Bart. We'll be back to you in a few minutes. John, I'll turn to you. This mass shooting out in California, is it different because it appears to be terrorism, or is the problem in America of large groups of people being shot en masse just an American problem that can be dealt with by controlling guns?
Well, there's many different, reasons for that, I think. But the incident in California, I think, was different in that they didn't seem to fit what we might think is a normal profile as far as he had a respectable position with the government, he was married, had a small child or whatever. So that throws a different reflection on it. In the past, we noticed a lot of people who were from unemployed, lower income, disenfranchised with the government, et cetera. So that puts a different perspective on it. I think the thing we had to take away from it is that mental health issues and their emotional state or whatever. I mean, who in their right mind would go after a mass shooting like that? I mean, the only people authorized are the military and law enforcement using their discretion. But when you look at those mass shootings, a lot of these people, I feel, had, emotional or mental health issues. And so that's another problem, I think, nationally, that we have to do more about that, detecting, evaluating, and treating, the mental health issues.
Because on some level, all of these people who carry out crimes like this are crazy, because you don't promote an ideology, whatever that ideology is, by killing people. Right. And again, I mean, as far as clinically, we may not be able to diagnose them as a psychotic or whatever, but emotional issues, like the other shooting that happened in Colorado or whatever, he had, abuse, domestic violence, aggressiveness, etc. I don't know if he was treated or was seen in therapy or whatever, but that may have been able to be prevented if we detected that earlier on. Okay, let's turn to Jackie a little bit. Jackie, what's your perspective as a media expert on all of this? What do you make of the coverage of it? Let's talk primarily about California. We're going to talk later about what happened in Colorado Springs. There was no rush to judgment in this case. The news reporters and anchors were careful not to indict anyone until they actually had all of the facts. That seemed to be important.
Well, that's right, because that's the job of the news media, is not to pass judgment until all the facts are in, or else they are giving misinformation. And that's why so many people dislike the media, because they think they are pushing their own agenda, that they show us what they want us to see. However, if you listen to the polarized news, the commentators, I was listening to right-wing radio that day. the first thing I heard was Islamofascism. Why isn't the news calling this Islamofascism? Well, the reason is because we didn't know yet, and we were waiting to see.
And we still don't know exactly what was in these people's minds, because this was not really a random shooting. They targeted people at his workplace.
Yeah, well, you've got to really look, like Dr. Bart was saying, into the mind of someone who's following ISIL now. It's usually a young person, somebody who wants something better than what they've got already. I mean, this man was what, a health inspector or something like this? He had a government job for the state. Not very exciting, not very sexy. So he gets his wife, who comes over from Pakistan, who believes in his ideology, and all of a sudden he believes in ISIL. ISIL promises a much better life. ISIL promises justice and a good life and enough food on the table for everyone. It's kind of like Robin Hood. That's how they're presenting themselves. Where in reality, they are not.
Right.
And we are the infidels, so it's all right to kill the infidels. So what I think we need to do is, like Dr. Bart says, is we're never going to wipe them out. What we have to do is go in for the motivation of why these kids are doing these things.
Let's turn to Joe for just a second. Joe, cops are finally popular. We bash cops a lot, but now we saw cops literally putting their lives before other people in California. In fact, one of the officers said to the people he was escorting out, "Don't worry, if anybody's going to get shot here, it's going to be me." The police response in California was phenomenal, as far as I've been able to see it as a layperson.
Yes, the response was very professional. If you listen to the tapes, nobody lost their control. It was very organized, very professional. But I think what we're missing here is we need to divide this issue into two parts. This particular issue in San Bernardino has nothing to do with gun control. It's a separate issue. This was an act of terrorism, clear and simple. If you want to talk about mass killings in the United States of America, let's talk about the Oklahoma bombing, over 100 dead, I believe 600 injured. The Boston bombing, 3 dead, 160 injured. 9/11, over 3,000 killed, thousands and thousands injured. How many guns were used in those attacks?
None, as far as I know.
So some of the worst mass killings in this country occurred with no guns being used. So we need to separate the gun control issue from the issue of terrorism. And we are dealing with a terrorism issue right now.
Politically, do you think the president is trying to muddy these waters?
Absolutely. I believe the president is trying to be politically correct, and he will not come out and say that this was an act of terrorism committed by extremists. He will not say that.
But I got to jump in.
Let me finish. The day it happened, the President of the United States is trying to push on us that this is possibly a workplace violence. This was no workplace violence. People engaged in workplace violence do not have pipe bombs in their house, automatic weapons,
we didn't
camouflage.
know that. We didn't know that.
It came out relatively quickly.
Yes, but you can't blame him for holding back. Well, he wasn't holding back. He was telling us what they knew at the time.
No, he was speculating on what he wanted it to be workplace violence.
No.
This workplace violence is one of the most ridiculous things I have heard in this particular case. This had nothing to do with workplace violence. This was a planned attack. Whether that was the target to begin with or they had other intentions, nobody pops up in a workplace environment in fatigues with their wife with a machine gun, 12 pipe bombs, remote control bombs. This was not workplace violence. The president embarrasses himself in this country when he says, well, we have to consider workplace violence. Loretta Lynch, as early as yesterday, was still talking about workplace violence. This is not workplace violence. This is terrorism that needs to be addressed and called what it is.
We know that now, but at the beginning we didn't know.
So then why did he come out and say it's workplace violence? If he didn't know
I'm
what
going to hold you there.
happened?
You both have points to make, and you both said them well. I'm going to turn to Bart Rossi because we talked a little bit about the psychological aspect of all of this. Doctor, do you agree with me that anybody who carries out a crime like this is crazy?
Absolutely. And I think what we're missing in this country, and I've heard it on some of the other networks, a lot of folks believe that it's only the schizophrenics who are crazy, people who are psychotic, as John Paitakes said before. That's not the case. We have over 300 million people in this country, and there are probably millions that have personality disorders, a lot of retained anger. They're hostile, they're abusive, they're nasty. We probably know some ourselves. People in our families, perhaps, that we don't want to be around. These people are out there. And this is the problem with guns and gun control. And I do agree, it's two separate issues. There's terrorism and then there's gun control. But we have too many people, like you say, who are crazy or pretty much crazy and do not We do not want them with guns, and yet it's easy to go and get a semi-automatic weapon or basically whatever they want.
Okay. Thanks, Bart. John.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on the mental aspect of it and piggyback on what Bart said. I understand NYPD now is offering a 2-week training program to all the police departments. They're going to do it in sections or whatever, to detect on the street if somebody's doing a crime, now not a very serious crime, if it's a mental health issue, and to refer them right away to an outpatient kind of place. And then the second part of the plan is they're going to have a couple inpatient residential areas for these people instead of, charging with a criminal offense. Now, these are for the lesser serious ones, okay? The theory being that, and they've started already in New Jersey, a special judge handling a mental health part of the court, okay? Similar to like a drug court. If it's not so serious an offense, 3 outpatient visits with a psychologist for counseling, back to the original judge and a probation officer. 5 contacts, 0 tolerance every week, all right? So that's another way to perhaps deter, solve, catch some of these people ahead of time, Now, it's going to evolve over a period of time, and the same thing happened with drug courts. Now we have a drug court in every county in the state, all right? I think Essex County has a mental health court now, and 3 other counties just got a grant to start that same procedure in this state or whatever. So I think that's another avenue that, may help to deal some of these mental health issues.
Tackle them quickly. Jackie, just to bring back some of the points that Joe was making before, I find that this administration tries to cloud the issue when people first pay attention. And it works because people look up from watching the Kardashians for about 2 seconds to see there was a shooting. They hear the president say it was workplace violence, and they go back to their phone and tweeting again. Days later, when we actually find out what might be behind the shootings, nobody cares anymore. So he's kind of diffused the issue by delaying his response. I feel Joe believes that. I don't think you believe that.
No, I don't believe it at all. I think it would be very irresponsible for him to come right out and say, hey, this might have to do with terrorism. I mean, we have Republican presidential candidates who are touting that kind of reasoning right now. And it divides people. It makes them see everything as good and evil. And the world is a much more complicated place than that. I would rather have my president tell me what he knows than to, as you said, cloud the issue and take a side before he knows what's really going on.
Joe, I'll let you pick
Well,
up.
what I would say to that is, Jackie said she would rather for the president to tell us what he knows. In this particular case, he didn't know anything, so he shouldn't have said anything.
He's got to say something. He's the president.
What he could say is, there was a tragedy in San Bernardino. We do not have all the facts at this point. We are investigating every angle, and once we have more information, we will get back to you. Don't go up there and speculate that, there's a good chance this was workplace violence, because that tells people, okay, workplace violence. We don't have to be worried because this was an isolated incident. If you don't know anything, don't say anything. Make general comments. Don't speculate it might be this. That's what the media does. The media does it all the time. They speculate. Workplace violence, terrorism, and they don't have the facts. So if you're saying, on one hand, the media shouldn't be doing it, well, then I don't think the leader of the free world should be doing it.
He wasn't doing that, and I
He
just explained
absolutely
it.
did that.
No.
Okay, Joe, what do we do now to get the guns, or how do we stop violence like this? So let's look at the California case separate, since you believe it's a separate thing than mass shootings.
How do we stop?
How do we stop this?
We don't. I'm going to be honest with you. The reality is we don't stop it. Because, first of all, let's go to the leadership issue. We have no leadership in this country. Both sides cannot come together with any reasonable solutions. Everything is us against them. If you are pro-guns, you're the enemy. If you're anti-guns, you're the enemy on the other side. So the reality is, listen, we can care ourselves all we want. We're not solving this problem until we get reasonable leaders elected. Until that day comes, this problem is not going to be solved. There are over 300 million guns in this country. This is like the fantasy of Donald Trump, that he's going to suck up 11 million illegal aliens and send them back to Mexico. We all know that's not happening. We all know that we're not going to confiscate 300 million guns. So I hate to tell people, but this is going to be the norm. It's not changing. There's very little you can do.
Let me turn to Bart Rossi. Bart, murder is illegal in this country, and people do it anyway. Almost everything that couple did in California several days ago was illegal. So why would passing tougher laws stop people like that? The only people who abide by the law are law-abiding people, right?
Well, that's true. But if you make it easy to get semi-automatic assault weapons, that's ridiculous. We have people on the no-fly list that Paul Ryan said should still be able to get guns. It makes no sense. That's not being a leader. That's pandering to the NRA. And we need leadership that says we're going to ban certain types of weapons. It doesn't mean that the Second Amendment goes away. Everybody can still go out and shoot and hunt and do what they want to do. But we also need mental health laws where we can watch people and put people in a place, in a facility, when they're dangerous. And we all know that certain people become dangerous. A lot of these shooters have the same profile. They all have the same type of profile. We know that. So why aren't we doing something vis-a-vis mental health? And it is polarized. The GOP doesn't really want to pass anything to do with mental health because the NRA wants something if they do pass it. So we're in a real quandary here. There's a lot we can do, but we're not doing it.
All right, Bart Rossi joining us from Florida. Thank you for your time. John
Yeah, I just
Paitakes,
wanted to-
thank you for your time. We are out of time for
okay.
this segment. Jackie and Joe will be back. We'll have more when we come back. We're going to take a look at what happened in Colorado, where a gunman murdered 3 people, including a police officer, at a Planned Parenthood facility. More on that after this.